Hello, I'm Anna Delaney, and I'm delighted to welcome to the IS&G studio, Filip Verloy, Technical Evangelist for the EMEA at Noname Security, and we'll be discussing shifting left for DevSecOps success. Very good to see you, Filip. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Anna. Appreciate the opportunity.
So, Filip, in this drive to shift left, where do you see increased business pressure to deliver new apps quickly?
Yes, I think a couple of things are relevant here. So depending on the vertical you are in as an organization, there are certain imperatives or directives or maybe even regulations that you need to adhere to. Think about regulations for financial institutions, healthcare, critical infrastructure like energy, for example. But in general, we keep seeing organizations of all sizes continue down the road of digital transformation, multi-cloud adoption, infrastructure automation, and so on. And they do this either for cost-saving reasons or to be able to better compete, essentially. So it is this drive to outperform competitors that is putting pressure on developers to deliver new and enhanced services and apps to market as quickly as possible. Developer velocity is a big driver these days. We see that with all of our customers. As an organization, you really can't afford to miss the next big wave of innovation in your field, as you will likely fall behind. I think it was GE's Jack Welch who once said, if the rate of change outside of the organization exceeds the range of change on the inside, the end is near. So another indicator, I think, is things like low-code and no-code. We're now seeing very custom, very tailor-made apps getting created by quote-unquote citizen developers, all in the name of having software better adapted to business processes instead of the other way around. So it's becoming clearer that we cannot wait until these applications are ready to go into production before we start worrying about adequately securing them. Instead, we need to start thinking about security in the design phase, really, and subsequently throughout the entire software development lifecycle.
Filip, how does the rise of super apps further complicate the challenge of introducing security?
Yeah, generally speaking, in security, we worry about exposure or attack surface. So if you think about the expanded breadth of these so-called mobile super apps, this is definitely something that we need to be aware of. It used to be that a mobile app did one thing and one thing very well, like a concert ticket buying app, for example. And now we see applications branch out more and more. The idea is to capitalize on the existing audience and to try and increase the monetization capabilities by introducing adjacent services. One recent example is Uber. They just announced a trial in the UK where they will add the ability to book long distance travel using planes, trains, and buses, for example. And that's really reflecting Uber's ambition to become a travel super app. So in technical terms, this means more integrations with third-party systems, more integrations with third-party services, which are mostly all API-based. And the more of these services that we string together, the bigger the potential misconfigurations and vulnerabilities will be. So think about where those services are running. So they could be purely on-premises, they could be hybrid, they could be in a single public cloud, in multiple public clouds. The service itself could be using a third-party SaaS provider for things like payments, for example. So sometimes these super apps are even described as platforms or even miniature operating systems of sort. So if you then think about security for a single application versus security for a platform that unites multiple applications, that really starts to complicate things.
So in this new urgency, how does one introduce security to the process?
Yeah, I think it all starts with awareness, making developers aware of the potential risks if they deliver applications and services that are not up to spec and are not, using security best practices. I think it will always be the case that bad actors will most likely walk the path of least resistance. So making sure that you have good security hygiene and good security baselines sort of differentiates your apps already from the competition. You're trying to just make it harder to misuse your application. I think that's a great first step. Really, if you think about it, this is nothing new. So even 20 years ago, I believe, Bill Gates wrote this fairly famous memo about trustworthy computing. Now, there's a lot of things known about Bill Gates, of course, and one of those is that he tends to read a lot of books. So on one of his book reading weekends, he read this book called Writing Secure Code. And after reading that book, he immediately sent that memo. And sort of in the memo, he mandated Microsoft should prioritize security over adding new features to the software. He even went so far as to say in the memo that, eventually Microsoft software should be so fundamentally secure that customers never even worry about it. They don't think about it. It's just, if you use it, it's going to be secure. And at that time, things were a lot more simple and a lot more centralized. So we did not even have, the abundance of API-based interactions. We did not have apps consuming services from all over the place. We did not have, B2B APIs communicating between computers and so on. So I think we really need to help bridge the gap to, let's say, getting developers, enabling them for speed to market and security. So it boils down to understanding and implementing a set of security best practices. In case of APIs, for example, we have things like the OWASP API Top 10, which is a very good guideline. And then we just need to put in place mitigations that avoid any exposure and risk.
Now, security is often seen as a blocker. How can one hook onto the process and not be perceived as a hindrance?
Yeah, this is really where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. So if there's anything that downright guarantees low adoption, it's introducing internal policies and regulations that have the potential to slow down developer velocity. So in order to be successful, we need to find an approach that can be incorporated into their existing workflow as much as possible. So if you look at how modern software development is being done, we have this move to agile that introduced things like CI/CD pipelines. We also brought operations closer with DevOps. So if we can find a way to slot into these existing workflows and offer value really quickly, it's really about providing additional peace of mind for developers as it relates to getting software out of the door, not only as quickly as possible, but as securely as possible as well. So if you sort of think about the 6 major phases of a software development lifecycle, you sort of go from analysis to design, to development, to testing, to deployment, and finally maintenance. I think we now need to aim to introduce security as much to the left of this cycle as possible, so to speak. So in the design phase, we already have to think through how we're going to secure these apps and secure these services. And then continue through to development and testing, etc. So the idea is to provide tooling in all of these separate stages of secure SDLC. To make that a little bit more concrete, let's say your developers are using tools like GitLab or GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps, etc. We need to slot into those tools, into those workflows, and just become another step of the pipeline of the process. At the end, what needs to roll out of the pipeline is more secure code, and I think we have a real opportunity to do that by becoming this sort of piece of the puzzle and slotting in a very low effort way. I think an additional question then could be like, who is ultimately responsible for securing APIs? So is it only developers, or do we have to think through this as part of a defense in depth strategy and treat it as another layer of the onion? And I think that's exactly what we need to do.
So Filip, you've done some new research into the shift left movement. What have you learned?
Yes, we worked with 451 Research. So we did a 2022 API security trends report just a couple of days ago. There were some interesting findings. First of all, on the need of additional security, really. So we saw that 41% of the organizations represented in this survey responded that they had an API security incident in the last 12 months. And 63% of those said that incident involved a data breach or data loss. So we then went ahead and tried to figure out, like, why did these incidents happen? And about I think 39% indicated, poor logging practices. 37% had problems with API authentication. Additionally, 36% suffered from misconfiguration of APIs. This all sort of suggests that security lessons and security best practices aren't being learned really. So there's a real opportunity to make that happen. A third of the respondents also said that this really impacted the speed of getting new services and new apps into production. And the vast majority of those said that this could have been prevented if they had a tighter integration of API security testing during the development lifecycle. So we feel that shift left will be a significant piece of solving this security puzzle going forward.
And Filip, how is Noname helping customers address these challenges?
At Noname Security, we take a holistic approach to API security, meaning shift left or helping developers avoid costly security mistakes is only one piece of the puzzle. So if shift left or secure SDLC is one piece, then posture management and runtime security are the others. So with posture management, we aim to de-risk, right? So we aim to be able to give the customer the ability to answer questions on where are my APIs, what are my APIs doing, are they handling sensitive data, who owns these APIs, when were they last updated, when were they last active, are there any misconfigurations there? And then with runtime security, we are looking at API transactions in real time, trying to determine if what we are seeing can be considered normal behavior, or can we detect any misbehavior? So is there an attacker trying to abuse your APIs? And we do this by leveraging machine learning. So we establish a baseline of normal behavior. We learn this over the course of a few days, and then we can detect any deviations from that baseline. And then finally, to sort of bring it back to the topic at hand and to help an organization shift left, we help by introducing security in the software development lifecycle. So when you introduce a new API, you update a service that you already have, we want to make sure that you're not introducing any new vulnerabilities. So adding those three up, and you are a long way down the path to better security, we feel.
Fantastic, Filip. It's been great talking with you, and thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you for having me.
I've been speaking with Filip Verloy of Noname Security, and for ISMG, I'm Anna Delaney.